In 1983, the stone walls of Whitmore House Orphanage were the kind of landmark you'd see on a postcard DV climbing up the facade. Gothic windows catching the light at sunset, the surrounding oak trees casting long, gentle shadows across the lawn. The last postcard anyone ever sent from there was postmarked March 4th. 2 days later, the place was empty. 50-9 children, 11 staff, gone. No alarms were raised. No missing persons reports were filed. The official explanation, what little there was of, it came in the form of a 2-sentence notice buried in the local paper due to unforeseen structural concerns and environmental hazards. Whitmore House Orphanage has been permanently closed. All residents have been safely relocated. Environmental hazards were never specified. Where they were relocated was never recorded, by the time anyone thought to ask real questions. The building had been boarded up and left too. The elements, a massive brick carcass slowly decaying at the edge of town. People whispered about it, said the place was haunted, cursed, even evil, but no one went inside. Not until 30 years later. Detective Naomi Hale was not the kind of person who chased ghost stories. She was a methodical investigator, an ex-homicide. Detective turned county investigator after burnout had chewed through the last of her big city patients. The quiet rural beat suited her until the night in late October when a local college student stumbled into the sheriff's office with a camera, bag full of evidence, and a look on his face that made Naomi's stomach knot before he'd even spoken a word. "I was exploring the Whitmore place," he began, voice shaking, "and I found something. You should see it." Most of the time, something meant graffiti, or a nest of raccoons, or an old mattress still reeking of the last squatters who used it. But the kid, his name was Evan, pulled out a stack of Polaroids and slid them across the desk. Naomi's hand stopped mid-reach for her coffee. The first photo showed a bare concrete room, maybe 12 by 15 feet. Along one wall, rusted steel bed frames were bolted to the floor, leather restraints still buckled to the corners. Another showed a set of filing cabinets and metal shelves lined with jars, labeled in the careful, tidy handwriting of someone who'd expected their work to be cataloged, not abandoned. The last photo was what made Naomi stand up. So fast, her chair slammed into the wall. Words were carved into the concrete in letters, deep enough to catch the flash. "They told us we were sick. We weren't. Help us." Below the plea were names, dozens of them scrawled in a child's desperate, jagged hand. Evan swallowed hard. "That's not all. There are files. Like medical files." I didn't touch much, but he reached into his bag again and pulled out a brittle manila folder. Oh. Inside, Naomi found a photocopied intake form for a boy named Anthony Blake, age 7. The diagnosis was a tangle of psychiatric jargon, but one margin note caught her attention. Normal development. Healthy child. Transfer for bed space. There was no date of discharge. No record of relocation. Naomi looked at the kid. "You can show me exactly where you found this?" He nodded, quick, like he'd been waiting for her to ask. The orphanage sat 2 miles out on County Road 14, where the streetlights petered out and the asphalt began to crack. Even from the gravel lot, Naomi felt it that strange. Pressurized quiet some buildings carry, like the air inside them is just slightly heavier than it should be. Evan led her through a gap in the fence and around to a side door. The boards covering it had already been pried loose. She could see where his crowbar had bitten into the wood. Inside, the air was thick with dust and mold. Naomi's flashlight beam swept over peeling paint, water stains, and the faint outlines of children's murals long since faded. A bulletin board sagged under the weight of curled, yellowing construction papers, tick figures, crayon suns, smiling houses. They moved deeper, their footsteps loud in the stillness. The basement stairs groaned under their weight. But down here, the air changed, colder, denser, with the metallic temps of rust and something else Naomi didn't want to name. At the end of a narrow corridor, Evan stopped in front of a section of wall that looked newer than the rest. Different mortars, smoother. Bricks. In the center, jagged hole gaped where someone had broken through. I noticed the hallway was shorter than it should have been, Evan said, crouching to slip through the opening. Naomi followed. Her boots hit the concrete inside the hidden room. She froze. The place was exactly as the Polaroids had shown it, restrained bed frames. Medical equipment, shelves lined with jars that glinted wetly under her flashlight. The air was wrong here too still, but with a faint chemical bite under the dust. She crossed to the filing cabinets. One drawer was already open. Inside were folders designed with meticulous care. Every one she pulled carried the same pattern. A healthy child reclassified as mentally ill within weeks of arrival. The notes read like pretext justifications for transfers. To unspecified locations, Naomi reached for her phone to photograph. The documents then froze at the sound above them. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Evan's eyes went wide. No one else supposed to be here. The footsteps stopped directly over their heads. Then came the faint, unmistakable sound of a door slamming and a lock turning. Naomi's pulse spiked. Someone had just sealed them in. Luis was halfway through drafting an evidence log when Naomi's phone buzzed across the desk. No caller ID, she answered. Hale. A voice, low and deliberate, slid into her ear. Stop digging, Detective. You'll end up in the ground. With them. Before she could respond, the line went dead. Evan shifted in his seat. Was that? At the pizza delivery guy, Naomi said, forcing her tone flat, even though her pulse was hammering. She hit redial. The call didn't go through, just a flat beep and the message number unavailable. Luis watched her carefully. They're spooked. Which means we've got something worth hiding. Naomi slid the phone into her pocket. Or we're all ready. Too late. By late afternoon, they were back at Whitmore House with 2 deputies, evidence kits, and enough cameras to document every inch of the basement. The main doors groaned open under Naomi's shove. The air inside colder than it had been. That morning, her boots crunched over fresh debris, a thin scatter of plaster dust across the entryway floor. She bent, touched it, still chalky. Someone had been back in here in the basement. The hidden room looked the same at first glance. The filing cabinets, the bed frames, the carvings. But when Naomi pulled open the first unlocked drawer, her stomach sank. Empty, every folder, every scrap of paper, gone. Evan's voice was sharp. It was full this morning. I swear I know, Naomi said. But her voice came out tighter than she meant. She checked the other cabinets. Same result, bare metal drawers. The faint rectangle of dust where folders had once sat. Luis was standing at the carved wall, his flashlight grazing over the names. There's something else, he said. Naomi stepped closer, just below the last name. Fresher scratches had been carved into the concrete 3 characters. F-13. She traced them with her fingertip. This wasn't here before. You're sure? I'd bet my badge. Evan frowned. What's F-13? A room number? Or a code, Luis said. If it's connected to those missing kids, it could be a designation. Facility? File? Something. Naomi straightened, scanning the rest of the wall. And that's when she saw it, a faint smear of something darker in the far corner, just above floor level. She crouched, touched it lightly, and her glove came away faintly tacky. Blood, she said. Not old. Luce's eyes hardened. They were here after you left, and when they moved the files. Naomi's phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. She put it on speaker this time. The same voice as before, still low, still measured. Last warning, Detective. Walk away. She kept her tone cool. Who are you? A pause. Then, the only one keeping you alive? The line clicked dead. They spent 2 more hours photographing everything left in the room, even the empty cabinets, then sealed the entrance with evidence tape. Back at the station, Naomi and Luis started digging into Whitmore House's past staff. Rosters, financial records, old inspection reports. Most of it was mundane. Invoices for food and cleaning supplies, payroll ledgers, maintenance schedules. But Naomi noticed something odd beginning in late 1982. A steady series of payments to a company called Harcourt Wellness Solutions. No description of services rendered. No contact information. Just the name and a 6-figure amount each month. Evan, perched on the corner of her desk, typed the name into his laptop. They don't exist. No website, no business listing, nothing. Shell company, Louise said. Probably to move money off the books. Naomi scrolled further back in the ledger. The payments stop in March 1983, the same week Whitmore. House closed. And 59 kids disappeared, Louise added. It was nearly midnight when Naomi pulled into her driveway. The street was quiet, the trees whispering in a faint wind. She killed the engine, sat for a moment, and thought about the voice on the phone. The only one keeping you alive? From what? Or who? She stepped out of the car and froze. There was an envelope taped to her front door. Inside, a single photograph, black and white, grainy, like it had been taken from a security feed. It showed her standing in the hidden room that morning, crouched over the filing cabinet. Someone had been watching them from inside the building. On the back, in neat block letters, "Stop, or you're next." Naomi locked the doors, every deadbolt sliding home with a heavy click, then moved through the house, methodically checking windows, corners, closets. Everything was where it should be. But that didn't mean she was alone. The photo sat on her kitchen table, the image staring up at her, grainy, but enough detail to make out the faint reflection in the cabinet's metal drawer, silhouette in the doorway behind her. She hadn't seen anyone when she was there. Her phone rang again. This time a real number appeared. Local area. Cody, she hesitated, then answered. "Detective Hale?" The voice was male, older, rasped with cigarettes. "You don't know me?" "Name's Richard Keene. I worked at Whitmore House back in '83, grounds crew." Naomi's posture straightened. "Go on. I heard you've been poking around down there. You're not going to find what you're looking for in those walls. They moved it all years ago. But there's something I kept. Kill me for if they knew I still had it." "What is it?" Pause then. "Proof that those kids didn't just get relocated, and the ones they took last weren't orphans at all." Naomi's grip on the phone tightened. "Where are you?" "I'm not saying on an open line. There's a diner off Route 6 Kelly's. Back booth. Half an hour. Come alone." The line went dead. Luis wasn't thrilled about her going solo, but Naomi promised to text him from the parking lot before she walked in. She pulled into Kelly's lot 27 minutes later. The place was nearly empty, neon buzzing weakly. Over the door, Richard Keene was easy to spot, mid-60s, a weathered face, work jacket with an oil company patch stitched above the pocket. He sat hunched over a mug of coffee, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. "You came," he said, as she slid into the booth. "You said you had proof." He glanced around, then pulled a battered envelope from his jacket. Six Polaroids, each dated March 5th, 1983, the day after the supposed relocation. The first showed the orphanage playground at night, floodlights glaring, several vans parked in the yard. The second, children lined up in pajamas, some crying, others staring blankly, while adults in medical scrubs moved among them. The next, three, were worse, kids being loaded into the vans, some limp in the arms of the adults, others struggling. The last photo froze Naomi cold. A single van, its rear doors open, revealing a row of metal gurneys inside. Strapped to them were children, 4 lines running from their arms to hanging bags of clear fluid. "Where did they take them?" she asked. Keene shook his head. "Don't know. I was fired 2 days later. Told if I opened my mouth I'd disappear too." Naomi leaned in. "Why keep these?" His eyes were flat. "Because one of those kids was mine." She sat back, stunned. Yours. He nodded once. A girl. Emily. Her mother died in a car wreck. I was working double shifts to keep her. In that place. Thought she was safe. His jaw clenched. They told me she died in her sleep. I didn't believe them that night. Took these before they spotted me. What happened when they saw you? I ran, and I've been running ever since. Before she could press him, the diner door opened. A man in a dark coat stepped inside, scanned the room, and started to ward. Them, Keen's face drained of color. It's them. The window behind him shattered. Naomi ducked instinctively as the sound of a suppressed shot cracked through the air. Coffee splashed across the table. Keen slumped forward, blood blooming across the back of his jacket. Naomi hit the floor, weapon drawn, eyes sweeping for the shooter, but the man in the coat was already backing out the door. She scrambled up. Firing once, the shot shattering the diner's front glass. Outside, tires squealed. A dark sedan peeled out of the lot, taillights vanishing into the night. Naomi knelt beside Keen. His eyes were glassy, breath shallow. She pressed her hands to the wound. Stay with me. His lips moved, voice barely audible. F13. Find Emily. Then his chest stilled. Naomi sat back, the envelope of Polaroids still on the table beside her, spattered with his blood. She was no longer just chasing a 30-year-old mystery. She'd just watched. F13 was... They'd just moved to the top of her list. The flashing red and blue strobes of patrol cars turned Kelly's diner into a fractured kaleidoscope of light. Officers cordoned off the scene while paramedics confirmed what Naomi already knew: Richard Keen was gone. Luis arrived 10 minutes later, face tight. Witness says a black sedan, no plates, tinted windows, came in hot, left faster. You get anything? Naomi held up the envelope, still smeared with Keen's blood. Proof he was telling the truth. And a new Emily, his daughter. Luce's gaze flicked toward the coroner's van where Keen's body was being loaded. He died for this? He died to tell me F13 and to find her. They retreated to her car, spreading the Polaroids across the hood under the harsh wash of the lot's security lights. Luis frowned at the sequence. March 5th, 1983. Vans. Kids in pajamas. Medical staff. And these gurneys. I tapped the last photo. They weren't taking them to another orphanage. No, Naomi said, voice low. They were transporting them like patients or test subjects. Luis exhaled. So F13 what? A code for one of these kids? Or for where? They were sent. Back at the station, Naomi locked herself in an interview room with the photos. The fragment of Keen's testimony she'd recorded on her phone and her laptop. She started with F13 in combination with Whitmore House records, but the orphanage's archived documents yielded nothing. Then she thought of the wall and the hidden room. The names carved by children's hands. She pulled up the photos she'd taken of it and zoomed in on the lower right corner. There it was, 13. Carved beneath the name Emily Keen, her chest tightened. Luis knocked once before stepping in. I pulled every archived state transfer log from January to March '83. Most of it's redacted. But there's one entry labeled F13 program. He slid a photocopy across the table. Date, March 6, 1983. From Whitmore House Orphanage 2. Harcourt Wellness Solutions F13 facility. Patient list, classified. Naomi's mind was already moving. Harcourt again. Same shell company from the orphanage's ledger. Luis nodded. I dug deeper. Harcourt was dissolved in 1984, but its assets were quietly absorbed by a company called Aurelius's Behavioral Research. Guess where they had? Facility codenamed F13? Let me guess, Naomi said. Somewhere remote, not just remote, a underground. Northern part of the county, inside an abandoned limestone quarry. Officially, it's been closed since 1991, but he slid another photo across the table's satellite imagery from 2 weeks ago. A convoy of 3 unmarked white vans parked near a rusted service gate. Naomi leaned back. Looks like F13's still breathing. The next day, they drove out there. No sirens, no marked units. Just Naomi's unmarked Crown Vic, creeping along a gravel road until it ended at a chain-link gate. The padlock was new, the chain heavy, but through the gaps they could see tire tracks cutting through the dirt. A hand-lettered sign hung crooked on the fence. Danger, unstable ground. Keep out. Louise snorted. Classic nothing to see here, Naomi. Studied the quarry beyond. The main pit dropped away in jagged terraces, shadows pooling at the bottom. Rusted conveyor belts and skeletal cranes jutted up like bones. But to the west, a concrete structure hugged the wall a squat building with no windows and a single steel door. You seeing what I'm seeing? Louise asked. Yeah, service entrance. They hiked down, boots sliding on loose gravel, until they reached the building. The steel door was locked with a key paddled, but not rusted. Naomi ran her fingers over it. This isn't 1983 tech. Someone's updated it. From above, the distant rumble of an engine made them both freeze. Naomi grabbed Luce's arm, pulling him into the shadow of the wall as a white van eased down the quarry road. No markings. Tinted windows. It rolled to a stop in front of the steel door. The driver male, mid-40s, stocky, got out, keyed in a code, and the lock clicked. Pushed the door open, disappeared inside. A moment later, two more figures emerged. Not kids, but young adults in hospital gowns, escorted by a man and woman in medical scrubs. Their faces were pale, eyes unfocused, movements sluggish. The escorts guided them up into the van. The door slammed, the engine roared, and the vehicle climbed. Out of the quarry, Luce's voice was barely a whisper. That's not relocation, that's custody. Naomi's jaw was set. That's captivity. They didn't follow the van, not yet. They needed more than suspicion before they made a move that could spook whoever was inside. Instead, they hiked back to the service road and waited for the quarry to go still again. Louise glanced at her. We're not walking away from this, are we? Naomi shook her head. No, we're going in. And when we do, we find Emily Keenor. What's left of her? They returned to the quarry at 3:17 a.m. The wind had shifted since earlier, carrying the scent of wet limestone and something chemical sharp enough to sting the back of Naomi's throat. The service gate was still chained, the padlock catching. A dull gleam in the moonlight. Louise pulled a small canvas pouch from his jacket. You never saw me do this. 30 seconds with the bolt cutters, and the chain slumped to the ground like a dead snake. They slipped through, replaced the chain loosely so it looked undisturbed, started the slow descent into the pit. Naomi kept her flashlight beam low, sweeping for motion. The quarry's floor was an uneven sprawl of puddles, gravel, and broken machinery. The squat concrete building loomed ahead, its steel door now shut tight. She stepped up to the keypad. The buttons were slick with condensation. Same code panel from earlier, she murmured. You get the numbers? Luis nodded, pulling a scrap of paper from his pocket. Watched the driver punch them in 3071. Naomi entered it. Keypad chirped once, and the lock clicked open. The door swung inward with a low groan. Inside was a short, sterile corridor lit by a single flickering fluorescent. At the far end, a metal stairwell descended into darkness. The air grew colder with each step, and the chemical temps intensified. At the bottom, the corridor split into 3 directions. A faded sign on the wall bore peeling black letters. Ward A gives Ward B gives Ward F13. Naomi exchanged a look with Louise. They followed the arrow down a sloping ramp that ended in another steel door, this one with a reinforced glass panel. Beyond it, the hallway was cleaner, newer. The walls were painted white, the floor polished, and the silence was absolute. Louise whispered. Feels active, like someone was just here. Naomi tried the handle. Locked. She pressed her ear to the glass. A faint sound reached her steady. Rhythmic. Mechanical. Ventilators, she said. Or for pumps. Luis shifted his weight. If this is what I think it is, they've been running it for decades. A metallic clang echoed somewhere deep in the facility, followed by the faint squeak of rubber soles on tiled footsteps. Naomi backed them both into the shadow of a doorway just as 2 figures in scrubs came into view on the other side of the glass. They pushed a cart stacked with covered trays. their faces partially obscured by masks as they passed. Naomi caught sight of a room behind them. Through a briefly open door, she saw rows of narrow beds, each occupied. The patients were young, maybe late teens to early 20s. 4 lines snaking into their arms. But it wasn't just the IVs that made her stomach knot. Each had a small, metallic disc adhered to their temple, blinking faintly with a red light. Luce's eyes met hers. "What the hell is that?" Before she could answer, one of the masked figures glanced toward the glass. For a split second, Naomi thought their eyes locked, then the figure kept moving, the cart's wheels squeaking softly until they disappeared around the corner. Naomi exhaled, slow. "We need to see that ward." Luis tilted his head toward the keypad beside the glass door. One problem. She studied it, noting the worn edges of certain buttons. 4 numbers, smudged more than the rest. 1379. Luis smiled faintly. "Ladies first." Naomi tried combinations, the faint click of the buttons loud in the quiet. On her third attempts, Evan 913. The lock disengaged. The door opened silently. They slipped inside. The air here was warmer, almost humid. The mechanical sound was louder ventilators and pumps working in unison. Each bed they passed told the same story. Pale skin, shallow breathing, the blinking red disc on the temple. Luis stopped beside one bed. The patient's wristband read, "Keene, Emily, March 14th, 1976. Naomi's throat went tight. "She's alive." Emily's eyes were closed, her expression peaceful in a way that felt unnatural. Luis checked her pulse. Steady, sedated, maybe more. Naomi reached for her phone to take photos, then froze as a voice boomed from an overhead speaker, calm but edged with steel. "Detective Hale, step away from the patient." Her gaze shot upward to the black glass dome and the corner security. "Camera," the voice continued. "You have no idea what you've walked into. Leave now, and we'll let you go. Stay, and you'll join them." Naomi's finger hovered over the camera icon on her phone. Her gut told her they were already in too deep to walk away. But walking out might be the only way to get evidence out alive. Luis was scanning the room, voice barely a whisper. "Know who you are," they said your name. The speaker crackled again. "Step away from the bed, Detective Hale. This is your final warning." Naomi slipped the phone back into her pocket and spoke toward the nearest camera. "I'm not leaving without her." There was a pause. Then, so be it. A metal door at the far end of the ward slid open with a pneumatic hiss. 2 figures stepped through, not the scrub-clad attendants they'd seen earlier, but security. Black uniforms, tactical vests, sidearms. Luce's hand went to his own weapon. "Naomi, I see them." The guards moved with controlled precision, splitting to flank both sides of the ward. The patients lay motionless, as if oblivious too. "The intrusion," Naomi whispered. "We fall back to the ramp. Try to get the door locked behind us." They began retreating, step by step, keeping their weapons low but ready. The guards didn't speed up. They just kept coming, boots whispering on the polished floor, hands resting on their holds. Then, behind them, another door opened. 2 more guards stepped in, cutting off the ramp. Luis swore under his breath. "We're boxed." Naomi's mind raced. No cover, except the beds, and she wasn't about to risk the patients. No obvious exits except the ones blocked. Then she spotted a tan, unmarked utility door halfway down the ward. Narrow, could lead to storage, could lead to nowhere. But it was something. She jerked her chin toward it, and they moved fast, weaving between the beds. One of the guards shouted short, sharp followed by the thud of boots quickening. Naomi shoved the utility door open. Inside was a narrow service corridor lined with pipes and electrical conduit. Dim light spilled from a fixture at the far end. They sprinted. The sound of pursuit echoed close behind. Halfway down, Naomi caught sight of a steel hatch in the floor. Bolted but not locked, she yanked it open and peered into darkness. The smell of damp stone rose up, along with a faint trickle of water. Luis glanced back. 2 guards were already at the corridor's entrance. We don't have time. Move. They dropped through, boots splashing into ankle-deep water. The tunnel was cramped, walls rough-hewn like an old maintenance shaft. Above them, the hatch slammed shut. The echoes of pursuit faded, replaced by the steady sound of water and their own breathing. They followed the tunnel for what felt like minutes. The air growing colder, the sound of machinery fading. Then ahead a faint square of light they emerged. Into the open air, at the base of the quarry wall, hidden behind a curtain of brush. Luis bent over, hands on his knees. We just walked out of a ghost. Naomi stared back, toward the concrete building, its steel door now just a sliver of shadow. In the night, they know we were in there. They saw our faces, and they still let us go. Luis straightened. Why? Naomi didn't answer, because deep down, she suspected the truth. Whatever was happening inside F-13, they wanted her to come back. By morning, Naomi had only managed an hour of sleep, if you could call it that. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the red blinking discs on the patient's temples, the slow mechanical rise and fall of their chests. Emily Keene's face was burned deepest of all. Luis showed up at her door just after sunrise, 2 coffees in hand. You look worse than me, and I drove through 3 counties without a seatbelt light going off. Naomi took the cup. We need outside eyes on this. Someone who isn't tied to county or state channels. Luis raised an eyebrow. You mean federal? I mean someone who knows how to get inside without a badge, she said. Someone the feds already owe favors to. That's how they ended up on the outskirts of Riverton, parked in front of a sagging brick warehouse with a hand-painted sign over the door, Merlin's Repairs. Inside, mid shelves stacked with antique radios and gutted televisions, sat a man in his late 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and nicotine-stained fingers. Detective Hale, he said without looking. Up from the circuit board he was soldering. If you're here, you're either desperate or reckless. Probably both. Good to see you too, Merlin, Naomi said. Merlin was a former surveillance contractor who'd been quietly forced out after an accounting error involving encrypted hard drives that were never recovered. He was paranoid, brilliant. They owed Naomi for keeping his name out of an arrest report 5 years earlier. She dropped the envelope of Polaroids onto his workbench. These were taken in 1983. We need them cleaned up, enhanced, and traced for. Any landmarks or identifiers? Also, she slid her phone over. Pulled the security feed metadata from these stills. Merlin's eyes flicked over the images, and for the first time, his hands stilled. Where did you get these? They cost someone his life, Naomi said flatly. Merlin studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Give me 24 hours. They killed the day at the sheriff's office. Going over everything they'd seen in F-13, Luis mapped out the ward from memory, marking where the utility door had been. Naomi traced connections between Harcourt Wellness Solutions, Aurelius Behavioral Research, and a handful of other shell companies, each one more obscure than the last. Every trail ended in a dead-end door, a law firm that refused to speak on the advice of counsel. It was just after 6 p.m. when Naomi's desk phone rang. Merlin, you're going to want to sit down, he said. I cleaned up your Polaroids. 2 of the vans have visible partial plates government fleet numbers. And your unknown staff in the background? One of them is Dr. Leonard Cray. Luis frowned. Who's that? Naomi's stomach sank. Head of neurological research at Aurelius from 1981 to 1990, he disappeared after a federal ethics inquiry, never charged, never found. Merlin's voice dropped. And one more thing, those red blinking discs you saw? They're not just monitors, they're neural interface nodes. Prototype tech. Wasn't even on the market until the mid-2000s. Which means, Luis finished for him, they've kept those patients under for decades. Merlin didn't answer. Naomi gripped the phone tighter. Send me everything you've got. We're going back in. At 2:14 a.m., Naomi's phone buzzed again. Not Merlin. Unknown number. A voice she recognized instantly. Calm. Deliberate. The same one from the diner's warning. Detective Hale, if you want the truth, come alone to the quarry at dawn. Use the hatch you escaped through and bring no one. Naomi's pulse jumped. Why? Because by sundown tomorrow, F-13 will be gone. All right, pushing deeper into part 3 of Orphanage of Secrets, the 30-year cover-up that still kills to stay hidden. As Naomi makes her move on F-13 before it's erased by 7:22 a.m., Naomi was back at the quarry's service gate. The chain still hung loose from when she and Luis had cut it. But fresh tire tracks in the gravel told her the site had been busy since dawn. She crouched, scanning the pit. No movement at the concrete building, but a low hum rose from somewhere below, generators working hard. The code Merlin had given her burned in her pocket. 9427. 38 minutes before it expired. She slid down the slope, boots biting, into the gravel. At the steel door, her fingers moved fast over the keypad. The lock clicked, and she slipped inside, stealing it quietly behind her. The corridor was just as she remembered, flickering fluorescent, the stairwell down. But now, faint wisps of smoke drifted up from below, and the air carried a tang of burning. Insulation. She descended fast, heart pounding. At the split, the sign to Ward F13 was going to ripped off the wall. A crude paper arrow marked "Evacuation gives Ward A." Whoever was in charge wanted anyone stumbling in to go the wrong way. Naomi turned the other direction. The ramp to F13 was darker now. Emergency lighting had kicked in, bathing the walls in an eerie red glow. Somewhere ahead, muffled voices barked ordersmen's voices. Urgent. Clipped, she eased up to the reinforced glass door, peering through. 2 guards in black uniforms moved between the beds, pulling 4 lines, stripping the blinking nodes from the patient's temples. The patients didn't stir. A third man in a lab coat oversaw it all, clipboard in hand. His face was lean, sharp-hand. Naomi recognized it from Merlin's file photo, Dr. Leonard Cray. Her hand itched toward her weapon. She could put him down now, but that would trigger the others to finish the job on the patients. She needed him alive long enough to get answers. The keypad beside the door glowed faintly. Now she punched in 9427. The lock disengaged with a soft click. The nearest guard turned at the sound. "Hey," Naomi stepped in, weapon leveled. "Hands where I can see them." "Now." The second guard's hand twitched toward his holster. She put a round into the tile beside his foot. "I said now." Dr. Cray raised his hand slowly, his expression maddeningly calm. "Detective Hale, I was wondering when you'd arrive. You're shutting this place down by killing everyone in it," she said. He tilted his head. "You think they're alive in any sense that matters? These are bodies housing simulations that have been running for decades. There's nothing to save." "Emily Keene," Naomi snapped. "You're telling me she's not alive? She's preserved?" he said, choosing the word like it was a gift. "But she hasn't been Emily for a very long time." Behind him, one of the guards shifted his weight, testing her focus. Naomi barked, "Don't." Cray's smile thinned. "If you remove them from the system without protocol, they will die instantly. The fire is a mercy." The faint smoke from the stairwell was thicker now, the smell sharper. Sprinklers hadn't activated, meaning it wasn't an accident. Naomi's mind raced. She had maybe minutes before the air turned unbreathable. "Then give me the protocol," she said. Cray's gaze held hers for a long beat. "There is no protocol. For you." And with that, he dropped his hands and shouted something Naomi didn't catch, because in the next heartbeat, the world exploded into motion. The guards lunged. Naomi sidestepped as the first guard lunged, letting his own momentum carry him into the bed frame. She drove her elbow into his ribs, felt the breath punch out of him, then twisted his wrist until his weapon clattered to the floor. The second guard was already moving fast, heavier, but Naomi dropped low, hooking his ankle and sending him sprawling. She kicked his sidearm away and came up with hers trained dead center on Dr. Cray. "Move," she snapped, but Cray didn't flinch. He simply reached to the nearest bed and pressed something on the small control unit at the patient's side. The red blinking disc on the temple went dark. The heart monitor flatlined. Naomi's stomach twisted. "That's how easy it is," Cray said, his tone almost clinical. "One press, and they're gone. Would you like to watch me do it too, Emily?" She closed the gap in 2 strides, slamming him back against the wall. "You'll give me her release code." "Now," he smirked, but she saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. You won't make it out before the fire does. Even if you had the code. Try me. Smoke was thicker now, creeping low across the floor. Heat radiated from somewhere beyond the ward metal popping, the distant roar of flames chewing through structure. Finally, Cray rattled off a sequence of numbers and commands, the syntax strange but precise. Naomi committed it to memory, then drove the butt of her pistol into his jaw. He crumpled to the floor. She moved fast to Emily Keene's bed, fingers flying over the unit's keypad. The monitor beeped. The red disc blinked once, twice then. Went dark. For a terrible second, Naomi thought she'd killed her. Then Emily's eyelids fluttered. Her breathing hitched. "Emily," Naomi said urgently. "We're getting you out." She ripped the 4 from Emily's arm, ignoring the sting of blood spotting the sheets, then slid her arm under the woman's shoulders. Emily was weak dead. "Wait," but she murmured something Naomi couldn't make out. The 2 downed guards were groaning now. She had seconds. Naomi hauled Emily up, and toward the utility door, the same one she and Luis had used before. The corridor beyond was already hazed with smoke, the heat chasing them. Halfway down, a beam overhead gave way with a groan and crash, showering sparks. Naomi ducked, shielding Emily's head, then pushed forward into the maintenance shaft. The hatch was harder to move this time, warped from heat, but she forced it open, sucking in a lungful of crisp morning air as she dragged Emily up into the brush. From the quarry floor below, orange light pulsed reflections of fire tearing through F-13, a deep, concussive thud rolled up through the rock, and a section of the concrete structure collapsed inward. Naomi lay Emily in the grass, checking her pulse steady, but shallow. The woman's eyes half opened, lips forming a single word, "Dad." Naomi's chest tightened. "We'll find him, Emily. I promise." Behind them, another explosion rocked the pit. F-13 was dying, but at least one of its ghosts had escaped. By the time Naomi got Emily into the Crown Vic's back seat, the woman was shivering despite the morning heat. Her skin was clammy, her pupils dilated and unfocused. Naomi floored it down the gravel road, one hand on the wheel, the other checking Emily's pulse every few seconds. It was steady, but weak, like her body was running on fumes after decades in storage. Luce's voice came over the dash speaker the second Naomi hit call. "Where the hell are you?" "I got to the station and your desk looked like you'd been abducted. I've got Emily Keene," Naomi said. "She's alive, barely. Meet me at St. Joseph's back entrance, 20 minutes. There was a pause. "You went back in without me?" "I didn't have a choice. And Luis F-13 is gone. They torched it." He swore under his breath. "I'm on my way." At St. Joseph's, the ER entrance buzzed with morning activity nurses. On shift change, ambulances pulling in, a couple of county deputies grabbing coffee. Naomi kept her head down, parking near the loading dock and waving Luis over. They transferred Emily to a gurney from the back door, where a sympathetic nurse Naomi knew from old cases hustled her into a private bay. No questions asked yet. When Naomi stepped into the hall, Luis was waiting with 2 coffees, his face tight. "You realize whoever ran F-13 is going to want her back," he said. "They're welcome to try, but they'll have to go through me." Luis glanced toward the closed curtain. "What about the others?" Naomi shook her head. "No time. The fire. It was meant to erase everything. Patients, files, tech." Ray said there was no protocol. "For pulling them out alive? Just for killing them?" Luce's jaw tightened. "Then Cray's our next priority." "Not possible," Naomi said. "He's buried under a few tons of concrete." Luis frowned. "You're sure?" Before Naomi could answer, a voice came from behind them, dry, amused. "I wouldn't be so sure, Detective." They turned, standing. There, with a thin line of soot across his temple and a fresh bandage on his left hand, was Dr. Leonard Cray. He was smiling. Naomi's hand went to her sidearm before her mind caught up. She had the weapon out and leveled at Cray in a blink. Luis stepped between them, his voice low but edged. "How the hell are you standing here?" Cray's smile didn't falter. "I walked out the same way you did. Different hatch." Naomi kept her grip tight. You were in the middle of the ward when the fire hit. I was, he said calmly. And unlike you, Detective, I planned my exits. Luce's jaw tensed. What do you want? Cray's eyes shifted. Toward the curtain where Emily lay. Her and the files she carries in her head. Naomi's pulse spiked. She's been in suspended simulation for decades. You expect me to believe she's carrying data? I don't expect you to believe anything, Cray said. I understand this. Every waking moment she has now will be comfortable, confused, painful, unless she's returned to the system. Naomi's voice was ice. That's not happening. He studied her for a beat, then leaned slightly closer. Detective Hale, you think the fire destroyed F-13? That was a shell. We've been off-site for years. What you saw was a relic. Luce's brow furrowed. Then why keep it running? Cray's gaze slid back to Naomi. For people like you, curious enough to chase a ghost, while the real work continues somewhere you'll never find. Naomi took a step forward. Try me. He tilted his head as if amused by a child's stubbornness. You're already too late. By sundown today, Emily will start to remember. Pieces of the simulation, it won't make sense to her, but to us, it's priceless. Louise shifted uneasily. What are you talking about? Cray's eyes hardened. Coordinates, Detective. Stored in the subconscious of every subject. Layered deep, scattered across hundreds of minds. Put them together, and you get the location of the real facility. And Emily has part of it, Naomi said slowly. The final part, Cray corrected. Before Naomi could move, a commotion erupted down the hall to orderlies rushing past, calling for security. When she looked back, Cray was gone, slipping into the chaos like a shadow. Louise swore. We can't keep her here. If he's telling the truth, they'll hit this hospital next. Naomi holstered her weapon. Then we move her. Somewhere off-grid. Louise glanced at her, and then what? Naomi's eyes were set, and we find the rest of those coordinates before they do. Naomi didn't wait for discharge paperwork. Within 20 minutes, Emily Keene was bundled in a heavy hoodie and sunglasses. Her frail frame supported between Naomi and Louise as they guided her out a side door. The Crown Vic was too conspicuous. For where they were going, so Louise had borrowed a county maintenance van peeling paint. Dented fender, but no GPS tracker. Naomi loaded Emily in the back, laying her on a folded blanket with a pillow beneath her head. Louise drove. Naomi sat beside Emily, keeping a close eye on her pulse and breathing. Every so often, Emily's eyes would half open, and she'd murmur something disconnected phrases. Names Naomi didn't recognize. They cleared city limits and turned onto a narrow service road that wound toward the foothills. After another 40 minutes, he pulled into a small property hidden behind a stand of old pines, a hunting cabin Naomi's uncle had used before his death. No power lines, no cell signal. Inside, they settled Emily on the couch, stoking a fire. In the old stone hearth to cut the mountain chill, Naomi sat at the coffee table with a notepad. Emily, do you know where you are? The woman's gaze moved sluggishly to Naomi's face. Not home. No, Naomi said gently. But you're safe. No one can hurt you here. Emily's brow furrowed. They'll come. They always come. Louise met Naomi's eyes over Emily's head, concern and something else. Emily, Naomi tried again. Can you tell me about the place you were before I found you? For a long moment, Emily was silent. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, white walls, hum in the air, water under the floor. Naomi leaned forward. Do you remember any numbers? Anything someone might have told you to remember? Emily's pupils contracted sharply, like something had triggered deep inside her. 7 East. 1-4. Gate 3. She blinked hard, tears welling. I'm not supposed to say you can tell me, Naomi said. It's important. Breathing quickened, her fingers clutched at the blanket, knuckles whitening. If I tell, they take the sky away. Louise frowned. The sky. But Naomi froze. The phrase wasn't nonsense, it was code. She'd seen it once before in an old Aurelius debrief report buried in classified appendices Merlin had flagged. For her, "Take the sky away" was a fail-safe phrase, a mental lock meant to shut a subject down if they got too close to revealing certain embedded data. Naomi kept her tone calm. "Emily, you're safe here. No one's listening but me and Luis." Emily's eyes rolled back slightly, her breathing slowing. Luis cursed. "She's shutting down." Naomi reached for her notepad, jotting the fragment 7 East, 14, Gate 3. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She looked at Luis. "We find the other subjects, we get the rest." "If Cray finds them first?" Luis asked. Naomi's jaw set. "Then he gets nothing." Outside, in the line of pines, a shadow moved between the trunks, watching. Naomi noticed at first a ripple in the darkness between the trunks, too deliberate to be wind. She kept her voice level. "Luis, go to the kitchen now." He didn't argue. Naomi rose slowly from the couch, hands slipping to the pistol at her hip. She stepped toward the front window, scanning the tree line. A second shadow broke from the cover of pines lower to the ground. Moving fast, the back door creaked. Naomi spun just in time to see a figure in black tactical gear pushing through the threshold, a suppressed sidearm raised. She dropped to one knee, fired once, and the shot punched through his shoulder, sending him sprawling against the wall. "Luis, now." Luis was already coming from the kitchen with the shotgun they kept by the pantry door. He moved toward Emily, shielding her as Naomi advanced on the intruder. The man was breathing hard, clutching his wound, but there was no panic in his eyes, just a flat professional focus. "Who sent you?" Naomi demanded. He didn't answer. Outside, movement again to more shapes flanking toward the cabin. Naomi grabbed the intruder by his collar, dragging him toward the window. "Call them off or you're the first one down." Still nothing, eh? Small click came from his Vesta transmitter. Naomi ripped it free, tossed it into the fire. The plastic popped as it melted. Luis swore. "They know we're here." Naomi made a decision. Now. She grabbed Emily, wrapping the blanket around her like a cocoon, and shoved open the rear exit that led toward the old service trail. The night erupted behind them, shouts. Boots on wood, the sharp hiss of a silenced round hitting the doorframe. Luis fired once over his shoulder, buying them seconds. They hit the tree line. Naomi leading with Emily clutched tight, Luis covering the rear. The moonlight barely touched the narrow trail, but Naomi knew it led to an old ranger outpost, a mile and a half away if they could make it. Halfway there, Emily stirred in her arms, her voice hoarse. 3-2. North, Gate 2. Naomi's chest tightened. Another fragment. Luis glanced back. "They're still on us," Naomi pushed. "Harder than we keep moving, no matter what." Behind them, the cabin's roof burst into sudden flame. They reached the ranger outpost just before dawn, lungs burning, clothes damp with sweat and smoke. Naomi kicked the door and it had been abandoned for years, but the roof still held. And the air was cooler inside. Luis set Emily on the cot in the corner while Naomi dropped the shotgun beside the door. Both of them stood for a moment, listening. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Luis broke it first. "We lost them?" Naomi shook her head. "They didn't lose us. They're waiting." Luis frowned. For what? She didn't answer. Dead. She moved to the small desk in the corner, rummaging through drawers, until she found a topographic map of the area. Edges curled. She spread it out, tracing the trail they'd taken from the cabin. Something caught her eye. The outpost sat less than 2 miles from an old mining road, one that hadn't been maintained since the 70s. But in Merlin's research, she remembered a different detail. Aurelius had leased the mineral rights in that area for nearly 2 decades, claiming it was for environmental testing. "Luis, they wanted us to run this way." He leaned over the map. "You're saying they funneled us here?" "Exactly. This whole stretch of forest is boxed in by their lease boundaries. If we keep moving east or north, we'll hit a perimeter they control." Luis swore under his breath. "And if we go back, they're waiting with rifles." Emily stirred on the cot, her voice raw. Under the ground, Naomi moved to her side. Emily, what's under the ground? Her eyes were glassy, but focused. Rooms. White rooms. Long halls. No sky. She swallowed. I can hear them. Even now.
Oh.
Luce's voice was low. She's remembering. Naomi grabbed her notepad, jotting the new phrases. Emily, can you hear anything else? Words? Numbers? Emily's gaze drifted to the ceiling. 5-9, south. 3-1, lock 2. Her voice trailed, breath slowing. Naomi exchanged a look with Luis. That's 3 fragments. Now, if Cray's right, we're building a map. A branch snapped outside. Naomi was at the window in an instant. Movement at the tree line, a single figure this time, not advancing, just watching. Then, slowly, they raised a small device and pointed it at the cabin. Luis, Naomi said sharply. He was already moving toward Emily. The figure pressed a button. The ground beneath the cabin shuddered deep, mechanical like something heavy shifting below the earth. The tremor deepened into a grinding roar. Naomi grabbed Emily, Luis covering them as the wooden floor began to split along a jagged seam. Out, Naomi shouted. But before they could reach the door, the floor gave way completely, swallowing. The cot, the desk, and the 3 of them, in a spray of splintered boards and dust, they fell maybe 12 feet before hitting. Metal hard enough to knock the air from Naomi's lungs. The echo told her immediately they were inside some kind of shaft. Above them, the ragged square of daylight shrank as a sliding steel panel sealed them in. Luis groaned, pulling himself up. You okay? Naomi nodded once, checking Emily, who was dazed but breathing. The shaft tilted slightly downward, the floor ribbed for traction. Dim red lights clicked on along the walls, revealing a narrow corridor that seemed to stretch forever into the earth. Luis wiped dust from his face. We walk into that. We're walking into their hands. Naomi glanced back at the sealed hatch above. Staying here means suffocating when they cut the air. They started down the corridor, the hum of unseen machinery growing louder. With every step, after several minutes, the passage opened into a larger chamber, smooth white walls, low ceiling, a single reinforced door at the far end. Above the door, black stenciled letters read, Sublevel access, Aurelius secure. Luis muttered. Guess we found where they moved F-13. Naomi stepped forward, scanning the frame. No keypad this time, just a square black panel that pulsed. Faintly, when she waved her hand near it. Biometric. She turned to Luis. They didn't bring us here to kill us right away. They want something. From the corner, Emily spoke, her voice oddly clear. It'll open for me. Naomi froze. Emily, how do you know that? I remember, she said simply. We used to go through here too, to see the others. Lou says. Grip tightened on the shotgun. Others. Emily stepped forward, placing her palm against the black panel. The door clicked and hissed, sliding open to reveal a hallway that looked exactly like the one in F-30, only newer, cleaner, and humming with activity. Far down the hall, 2 figures in lab coats turned toward them. Naomi whispered, Stay behind. Me. But Emily didn't. She stepped over the threshold like she'd never left. And the 2 lab techs smiled. Naomi's instincts screamed. She reached for Emily's arm, but the lab techs moved first, arms out, palms open, as though greeting an old friend. Welcome back, Subject Keen, one of them said warmly. We've missed you. Emily didn't. Recoil. She smiled faintly, like a child recognizing a familiar face. You kept the sky. The phrase made Naomi's stomach twist. It was the same one Emily had used earlier, the one she'd flagged as code. Luis stepped up beside her. Naomi, something's wrong. The techs didn't seem to notice them at all. You're right on schedule, Emily, the taller one said. We can begin reintegration immediately. Emily nodded, taking a step toward them. Naomi caught her wrist. Emily, listen to me. You're not theirs anymore. Emily's expression wavered, confusion rippling across her features. But I belong here. The shorter tech pulled a small tablet from his coat pocket, tapping rapidly. A soft chime echoed through the hall, and a side door slid open. Behind it, Naomi caught a glimpse of a room lined with sleek pods, dozens of them each, holding a still figure wired into a neural harness. F-13 hadn't been destroyed. It had been replicated-expanded. Luis swore under his breath. Jesus, there must be 50 of them. Naomi's grip tightened on Emily's wrist. We're leaving now. The taller tech finally looked at Naomi, his smile fading into something. Calder. Detective Hale. If you remove her now, you'll kill her. She's still linked to the network. Severing that connection without calibration will cause irreversible brain failure. Naomi's mind raced. Was it a bluff or the truth? Emily looked from Naomi to the techs, her breathing quickening. It's okay, she whispered. I'm not afraid. Behind them, the reinforced door slid shut with a final metallic thud. Luis. Raise the shotgun, Naomi. Tell me you've got a plan. Naomi forced herself to keep her voice steady. I've got about 30 seconds to make one. And in the pods behind that open door, one of the still figures stirred. The movement in the pod was subtle, a twitch of fingers, the slow lift of eyelids. But Naomi caught it instantly. She pushed past the techs before they could react, stepping into the chamber. The hum of machinery was louder here, a constant background. Vibration that seemed to crawl up her spine. Each pod was labeled in clean black font subject 001 through subject 052. The one that had moved was subject 019. The glass of the pod's canopy was fogged slightly from within, but through it Naomi could see a man's face sunken from long stasis, but not unfamiliar. Her pulse spiked. Luis stepped up beside her. Naomi? Is that Chief Marcus Hale? She said, her voice low. Luis stared. Your father? She didn't answer. One of the techs appeared in the doorway, voice clinical. Subject 19 is not due for reactivation. He is unstable. Naomi turned on him. You've had him here for 30 years. We've had them all here for 30 years, the tech replied. Your father volunteered for Phase 1. He understood the value of the work. Luis's grip on the shotgun tightened. Pretty sure kidnapping kids and turning them into lab rats wasn't in his job description. The other tech joined him, tablet still in hand. Detective, you must understand these subjects are not prisoners. They are the program. Without them, the network collapses. Naomi's eyes went back to the pod. Her father's lips moved faintly like he was trying to speak. Emily's voice came from behind her. He knows the rest. Naomi turned. The rest of what? Emily's gaze was steady now, sharper than it had been since Naomi pulled her from. F-13. The coordinates. I only have the last piece. He has all the others. Luis swore under his breath. So if we wake him, the shorter tech cut in sharply. If you wake him without integration, you'll kill him. And then the data dies with him. Naomi's mind was a hurricane, her father alive, but trapped in the same network that had nearly erased Emily. The final coordinates locked in his head, and Cray somewhere above ground, waiting to reclaim them all. The taller tech's voice was calm, almost soothing. You want to end this, Detective Hale? Then we do it properly. Controlled extraction. And you work with us. Naomi stepped back. From the pod, her hand hovering near her holster, where she said, I take him now and burn this place to the ground. And then, from deeper in the chamber, a voice Naomi hadn't heard in 3 years echoed out, You'll have to get through me first. Naomi turned toward the sound, the hair on the back of her neck rising. From the far row of pods, a figure stepped into the dim light knot in a lab coat. It's not in tactical gear, but in the dark gray fatigues of Aurelius Field Ops. His face was leaner than she remembered, eyes harder, but there was no mistaking him. Evan. Luce's voice was tight. You know this guy? Naomi didn't lower her weapon. Partner. 3 years ago. He went under on a deep cover assignment. I thought you were dead. Evan's mouth twisted into something halfway between a smirk and a grimace. You weren't wrong. Part of me is. He stepped closer, hands visible, though his posture radiated. Quiet menace. You shouldn't be here, Hale. You're not equipped to handle what's down here. Looks like I'm already handling it, she shot back. He shook his head. You don't get it. This isn't just about pulling people out of pods. The network runs through them. Every subject is a living node. Take out the wrong one, and the whole system destabilizes, Luis muttered. Sounds like a sales pitch for keeping them locked up. Evan's gaze hardened. It's a warning. Or pull your father without protocol, you fry him in, you trigger the failsafe. This place collapses, with all of us in it. Naomi didn't look away. Whose side are you on? I'm on the side that keeps the data intact, Evan said. And right now, that means keeping you from making a mistake you can't undo. Emily stepped forward, her voice oddly steady. He's telling the truth, but he's leaving something out. Naomi's eyes narrowed. What's that? Emily looked at Evan. Tell her what happens when the last coordinates are assembled. Evan's jaw worked, but he didn't answer. Immediately, when he did, his voice was low. They lead to the core site. The original facility. And if Aurelius gets there first, it's over. Whatever's left of these people gone. Luce's grip tightened on the shotgun. So it's a race. Evan nodded once. And I'm the only one who knows how to get you out of here alive to run it. Naomi didn't lower her weapon, not yet. But for the first time, she was listening. Naomi's finger tightened fractionally on the trigger. If you're playing me, Evan, you know how this ends. He didn't blink. If I were playing you, you'd already be in one of those pods. Luis glanced between them. We don't have time for this pick-a-lane. Naomi exhaled through her teeth. Fine. You lead. But the second I smell a double cross, you're done. Evan gave a single nod and turned to the techs. Override the east maintenance corridor. We're moving them to sublevel D. The taller tech hesitated. That wing is sealed. Not anymore. Evan cut in. They moved fast. Evan at point, Naomi close behind with Emily. Luis guarding the rear. The east corridor was narrower, the air cooler, with conduits running along the ceiling that hummed faintly. Naomi kept her voice low. Where are we really going? Evan didn't slow. Sublevel D is off-grid.
Off-grid.
No live feed to the core network. We can stage there while I pull a clean extraction route. And my father? Evan glanced back at her. He stays here for now. If we take him now, they'll trace us before we hit daylight. Every instinct in Naomi rebelled, but she forced herself to keep moving. Emily's breathing was uneven, but she stayed quiet, her gaze flicking over the walls as though searching for something only she could see. They reached a reinforced bulkhead. Evan keyed in a code Naomi didn't recognize, and the door hissed open into a wide chamber that smelled of dust and disuse. Dim yellow lights flickered overhead, revealing rows of decommissioned pods, their glass cracked or gone entirely. Luis scanned the space. Why do I get the feeling this isn't just storage? Evan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crossed to a wall panel, pried it open, and pulled out a thin, sealed case. He set it on a nearby table and looked at Naomi. This, he said, unlocking the clasps, is the other reason I came back. Inside was a small metallic sphere, no larger than a fist, its surface etched with the same glyphs Naomi had seen in Merlin's classified appendices. Emily took a sharp breath. The anchor. Naomi looked between them. What is it? Evan met her eyes. The key to severing the network without killing the nodes. Luce's voice was flat. And you've been sitting on it down here? Evan closed the case again. Because the moment I move it, Aurelius will know. Which means when we leave, we don't get a second chance. Naomi stepped closer. Then we make it count. Somewhere deep in the facility, a low, rising alarm began to wail. Evan's jaw tightened. They know. The alarm was low and pulsing, almost felt more in the chest than heard. Naomi knew that kind of tone. It wasn't for fire or breach. It was a containment protocol. They're locking this level, Ivan said, already slinging the case with the anchor across his back. We have maybe 4 minutes before the bulkhead seal. Luis chambered around in the shotgun. Then we don't stand here talking. Naomi grabbed Emily's hand. Stay with me, no matter what happens. They ran, boots echoing off the metal grating as they cut through the maze of dormant pods and storage bays. The yellow lights overhead stuttered, switching to red. Somewhere behind them, hydraulics groaned, the bulkhead doors starting to drop. Evan led them down a side passage Naomi hadn't noticed before, narrow and half-lit, lined with conduit bundles. "Service route," he called over his shoulder. "Not on their main schematics. Where does it come out?" Naomi asked. "Sublub will be closer to the elevator bank." Emily stumbled and Naomi caught her, steadying her against the wall. "You okay?" Emily's pupils were blown wide. "They're talking to me." Naomi crouched to meet her eyes. "Is the others?" "They can feel we're leaving." Her voice shook. "They don't want to be left behind." Evan swore quietly. "Oh, she's linked in again. If they push hard enough, they can use her to track us." Luis glanced back the way they came. "Sounds like they already are." From the shadows at the far end of the service passage, a figure emerged tall, moving with the calm certainty of someone who knew the place better than they did. Dr. Cray. He stopped just outside the red glow of the overhead lights, voice carrying easily. "Detective Hale, you found my anchor." Evan shifted, stepping slightly in front of Naomi. "You're not getting it." Cray smiled faintly. Evan, still pretending you're on the outside. "You think I don't know why you came?" "Back." Naomi's grip on her pistol tightened. "You're not walking out of here with her, Cray." He didn't even glance at the gun. "It's fine. I don't need to." His eyes moved to Emily. "She'd walk out with me." Emily's breath hitched. "It's safer," she whispered, as if repeating something she'd been told 1,000 times. Naomi's heart pounded. "Emily, look at me. You decide where you go, not him." But Cray was already moving closer, unhurried. "Tick-tock, detective." Bulkheads closing. "Can carry her and the anchor, or just the anchor. You don't have the time or the strength for both." Luis raised the shotgun. "We'll make time." The sound of metal slamming shut somewhere behind them made Naomi's decision for her. "Run," she told Evan. "I've got the rear." Evan didn't hesitate. He bolted down the service corridor, the anchor case bouncing against his back. Emily pulled along by his free hand. Luis followed close, covering them with the shotgun. Naomi moved last, backing toward the junction while keeping Cray in her sights. "You've got 30 seconds before this section seals." Hola, Cray called, his voice calm as a scalpel. "And when it does, you'll have nowhere left to run but down." Naomi squeezed off 2 shots. The first smacked into the wall inches from his head. The second shattered a light fixture above him, plunging him into shadow. She turned and ran. They hit sublevel B just as the final bulkhead dropped behind them, the impact vibrating through the floor. This level was busier lab techs scattering at the sight of them, alarms still pulsing, red lights bathing the hallways. Evan cut left, into a room lined with consoles and wall-sized displays. "Close the door," he barked to Luis, who slammed the manual latch. Naomi pulled Emily into a corner, crouching low. "Talk to me," she told Evan. "How do we kill this thing?" Evan set the anchor case on the table, snapping it open. The metallic sphere gleamed under the emergency lights. "This is one half of the severance system. It's a physical key it interfaces with the network's root hub. But without the second device, it's useless." Luis groaned. "And let me guess the second one's not in this building." Evan shook his head. "It's at the core site, the original Aurelius facility, coordinates for which he glanced at Emily, are currently locked inside her and a handful of other subjects." Gut. "So even if we get out, we still have to find the others before Cray does." "Exactly," Evan said, "and he's ahead of us." Emily's voice was quiet but firm. "I can find them, if you keep me out of the pods." Evan studied her for a moment. "Then we move now. We've got one chance before they lock the elevator banks." Naomi grabbed the anchor case, slinging it over her shoulder. "Lead the way." But before Evan could touch the console to open the door, the screen above it flickered to life. Cray's face filling the display. "You're making this unnecessarily difficult." "Hail, hey," he said, his tone almost amused. "Leave the anchor. Leave the girl. Walk out alive." Naomi stepped toward that camera. "Not happening." Cray's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then you'd better start running faster. I've just ordered a full purge of sublevile B." Somewhere below them, machinery roared to life. Evan didn't hesitate. He bolted down the service corridor, the anchor case bouncing against his back. Emily pulled along by his free hand. Luis followed close, covering them with the shotgun. Naomi moved last, backing toward the junction wall, keeping Cray in her sights. You've got 30 seconds before this section seals. Hal, Cray called, his voice calm as a scalpel. And when it does, you'll have nowhere left to run but down. Naomi squeezed off 2 shots. The first smacked into the wall inches from his head. The second shattered a light fixture above him, plunging him into shadow. She turned and ran. They hit sublevel B just as the final bulkhead dropped behind them, the impact vibrating through the floor. This level was busier lab techs scattering at the sight of them, alarms still pulsing, red lights bathing the hallways. Evan cut left, into a room lined with consoles and wall-sized displays. Close the door, he barked to Louise, who slammed. The manual latched on Naomi pulled Emily into a corner, crouching low. Talk to me, she told Evan. How do we kill this thing? Evan set the anchor case on the table, snapping it open. The metallic sphere gleamed under the emergency lights. This is one half of the severance system. It's a physical key interfaces with the network's root hub. But without the second device, it's useless. Luis groaned. Great. And let me guess, the second one's not in this building. Evan shook his head. It's at the core site. It's the original Aurelius facility. Its coordinates for which he glanced at Emily are currently locked inside her and a handful of other subjects. Naomi felt the weight of it settle in her gut. So even if we get out, we still have to find the others before Cray does. Exactly, Evan said. And he's ahead of us. Emily's voice was quiet but firm. I can find them, if you keep me out of the pods. Evan studied her for a moment. Then we move now. We've got one chance before they lock the elevator banks. Naomi grabbed the anchor case, slinging it over her shoulder. Lead the way. But before Evan could touch the console to open the door, the screen above it flickered to life. Cray's face filling the display. You're making this unnecessarily difficult. Hale, he said, his tone almost amused. Leave the anchor. Leave the girl. Walk out alive. Naomi stepped toward the camera. Not happening. Cray's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then you'd better start running faster. I've just ordered a full purge of sublevel B. The floor beneath them began to vibrate, not in short bursts like the bulkhead doors, but in a steady, bone-deep tremor. The consoles along the wall flickered and died. Evan's face tightened. He's venting the atmosphere. They'll cycle every sealed section until there's nothing left breathing. Luis yanked the manual latch on the far side of the room. Then let's move before we become the test case. They bolted into the hall, weaving through the maze of red-lit corridors as vents overhead began to hiss with a cold, dry wind. Naomi could feel the pressure change in her ears. It wasn't just air they were pulling. The whole section was being prepped for sterilization. They reached the freight elevator bay just as the last techs were fleeing. Evan slapped his hand to the biometric panel, muttered a code under his breath, and the heavy gate clanked open. Inside, the elevator was little more than a steel cage with a grated floor. Naomi shoved Emily in first, then Luis, then stepped in herself, while Evan hit the controls. The gate slammed shut. With a grinding roar, the cage dropped. Naomi gripped the side rail, staring through the grating at the blur of concrete walls rushing past. Where are we going? Evan's eyes stayed on the floor counter above the panel. Sublevel Elus's head snapped toward him. I thought D was the lowest. It is, Evan said. Officially, the numbers tick down B, 2B3. C, Dion kept going. Emily's fingers tightened around Naomi's. I know this place, she whispered. Naomi glanced at her. From before? Emily shook her head slowly. From dreams. There's something waiting at the bottom, Luis muttered. Let's hope it's not Cray. The counter hit E, the cage shuddered to a stop. The gate slid open with a groan, revealing a cavernous space lit only by rows of dim blue panels along the far wall. In the center stood a single cylindrical structure, taller than a house, cables snaking from its base into the floor. Evan stepped out first. Welcome, he said grimly, to the heart of the network. Somewhere deep inside the cylinder, something shifted slow and deliberate, like whatever was in there had been waiting for them all along. Somewhere below them, machinery roared to life. The air on sublevel E was colder, metallic, laced with something faintly sweet that made the back of Naomi's throat itch. She stepped out of the cage slowly, scanning the cavernous space. The walls were sheer concrete, disappearing into shadow. Above, the only light coming from the faint blue glow of the panels lining the far wall, the cylindrical structure dominated the room, its surface a matte black broken only by seams where panels met. Thick cables, the size of Naomi's wrist, ran from its base into the grated floor. Each one humming with a slow, pulsing rhythm, Luis muttered. "That's not a server rack," No, Evan said, moving toward it. "It's the core chamber. Physical housing for the network's primary node." Naomi's eyes tracked the subtle movement within just a ripple at first. Then the faint outline of something pressing against the inner surface from the other side. Emily stepped closer, her voice low. "It's awake." Naomi glanced at her. "Sharply, what is?" "They called it the Conductor," Emily said. "It keeps us linked. It decides who sleeps and who wakes." Luis looked uneasy. "That thing's alive?" "Not in the way you think," Evan said, reaching a small console built into the base of the structure. "It's a hybrid interface biological substrate wired into quantum architecture. Without it, the network collapses." Naomi came up beside him, so we unplug it. Evan's hands hovered over the console. "It's not that simple. It's the Conductor's link to every node. To kill it, and the shock wipes them, all including your father." Naomi's jaw clenched. "Then how do we shut it down without killing them?" Evan's gaze flicked to the anchor case slung over Naomi's shoulder. "We installed the anchor into the Conductor's housing. It forces a phased disconnect low enough to extract the node safely." "Great," Luis said. "Let's do it." Evan hesitated. "There's a catch. The anchor has to be monitored in real time during the disconnect. Manual oversight. Which means someone stays," Naomi finished. The Conductor's inner surface rippled again, this time forming a clear handprint against the translucent membrane. Emily flinched, but didn't back away. "It knows we're here," she whispered. Evan looked at Naomi. "You wanted to end this. This is how. But whoever stays won't be leaving." The Conductor's pulse quickened, and from somewhere above, a distant clang echoed down the shaft, followed by the unmistakable hiss of the freight elevator. Beginning its descent, Cray was coming. The hiss of the freight elevator was slow but steady, its metal groan reverberating through the chamber. Naomi's hand went to her pistol. Evan was already at the console, fingers flying across the keys. "We don't have long, once he's down. Here, he'll lock us out of the system entirely." Luis stepped toward the elevator shaft, shotgun raised. "I'll slow him down." Naomi shook her head. "No, if this goes bad, we'll need every gun here." Emily stood inches from the Conductor now, staring into its shifting surface, as if listening to something only she could hear. "It wants me," she murmured. Naomi turned sharply. "Emily, she's not wrong," Evan said without looking up. Her neural signature's already in the system. She could run the anchor sequence without a full interface. Lower risk of overload. Luis swore. "Lower risk still means risk." The freight elevator clanged to a stop. A moment later, the gate rolled open and Cray stepped out, calm, immaculate, no weapon visible, but flanked by 2 armored operatives. His eyes swept the chamber, lingering on the anchor case. "I see you've found my heart," he said, his voice carrying easily. "And you've met the Conductor. Beautiful, isn't it?" "Monstrous," Naomi shot back. He smiled faintly. "Semantics." Evan stepped between him and the console. "We're shutting it down, Cray." Cray's gaze flicked to Emily. "Ah, my prodigal returns to finish what she started. Remember, don't you, Emily? You were meant to replace the Conductor one day. That was the design." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "I know." Naomi moved closer to her. "You don't have to." "Yes, she does," Cray cut in. "Because without her, the network dies hard. When it does, so do every one of the nodes you're trying to save, your father included. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Evan said, "Naomi, make the call. Who runs the sequence?" Conductor pulsed again, its glow deepening to a steady, thrumming light. Emily looked up at Naomi, eyes wide but steady. "If it's me, I can finish it before they take it back." Craze. Operatives raised their weapons. "Or," he said smoothly, "you hand me the anchor and walk away alive." Naomi took a breath, the weight of every choice pressing down. Behind her, the conductor's handprint faded, replaced by a faint, shifting outline of a face one she recognized instantly. Her father. Naomi froze at the sight of her father's features pressed faintly into the conductor's shifting membrane. His eyes were closed, but his mouth moved, forming words she couldn't hear. Luce's voice broke through the hum. "Naomi now or never?" She looked at Emily. The girl's hands were steady, her expression calm in a way that didn't belong on a child. "You're sure?" Naomi asked. Emily nodded once. "If I don't, he dies." "They all do." Naomi turned to Evan. "Get her plugged in." Evan didn't hesitate. Flipped open the anchor case, pulling the metallic sphere free. The glyphs along its surface began to glow faintly as he slotted it into a recessed port on the console. A low tone filled the chamber, and the conductor's pulsing rhythm shifted. Sinking to the anchor's beat, Emily stepped forward, placing her palms against two copper-colored plates. The panels lit under her touch, lines of code streaming down the console's screens. Cray's smile thinned. "So be it." He raised his hand, and his operatives opened fire. Naomi and Luis moved instantly, dropping behind the anchor's housing, and returning fire. Sparks rained from the catwalk above as bullets chewed into the steel. Evan hunched over the console, shouting over the noise. "She's in." Sequence started. "Time." Naomi called. 7 minutes. Cray advanced behind his men, calm amid the chaos. 7 minutes too long, Detective. You can't hold this position." Emily's voice cut through, flat and focused. "Don't let him touch me." Naomi popped up from cover, firing twice, forcing Cray's men to fall back toward the elevator. But Cray himself didn't retreat. He stepped toward the conductor, ignoring the incoming rounds, eyes fixed on the membrane. "Marcus," he said softly, as though speaking to Naomi's father, "you don't have to let them do this." To Naomi's shock, the outline of her father's face shifted, turning toward Cray. Naomi's pulse spiked as the conductor's membrane rippled, her father's faint outline turning toward Cray. For a split second, she could almost imagine he was awake, dash aware, dash choosing. Evan's voice cut sharp. "Naomi, he's interfering with the sequence." On the console, streams of green code began fracturing into red alerts. Emily's jaw tightened, her small frame trembling as she held her palms to the plates. "He's pushing back." Not just him, all of them. Luis fired a burst toward the elevator, forcing one of Cray's operatives to duck behind the gate, then push harder. Emily's eyes squeezed shut. "If I do, it'll burn him out." "Your father." Naomi moved closer to her, crouching low. "Emily, listen to Mew. Control this. Not them. Not Cray." Cray's voice was calm, coaxing. "Marcus, you know she's lying. I'll take you out of the network and leave the rest to die. Stay with me, I'll keep them safe." Conductor's pulse faltered, the anchor's rhythm slipping. Evan swore under his breath, fingers flying over the console. We lose sync for more than 60 seconds. The failsafe kicks in full purge. Naomi's mind raced. She could order Emily to push, sacrificing her father to save the rest, or she could try to talk him back, knowing Cray was in his head. Stepped to the conductor, pressing her palm to its cold humming surface. "Dadits me." "Naomi." For a moment, nothing changed. Then the membrane rippled, and his face turned toward her again. His lips moved, 3 words, faint but unmistakable. "Don't trust Evan." Naomi's stomach dropped. She turned toward. The console Evan was still working the sequence, his face tight with concentration. 30 seconds to resync, he called without looking up. Behind her, Cray smiled. "Now you see, Detective, the real enemy isn't who you thought." Naomi's grip on the conductor's surface tightened. Her father's face was already fading back into the swirl. Those 3 words clung like ice to her spine. She turned toward Evan. Why would he tell me not to trust you? Evan didn't look up from the console, because craze in his head, twisting his perceptions. You know how the network manipulates memory? Cray's voice slid between them like a blade. Or maybe Marcus remembers something you don't. Something about Evan's original assignment. We sparked from cover. Less talking, more shooting. They're flanking left. Naomi fired a short burst to drive Cray's operatives back, but her focus kept darting to Evan's hands on the controls. Tell me the truth, Evan. What was your assignment? His jaw tightened. Same as yours? Filtrate, gather intel, dismantle Aurelius. Except you went dark for 3 years, Cray said smoothly. And when you came back, you knew exactly where the anchor was hidden. Evan finally looked at Naomi, because I stole it from him. You think he'd have let me walk out alive? If I was still his? Emily's voice strained over the hum of the conductor. Naomi, it can't hold sync much longer. Decide. The console's timer flashed red 018. Naomi's mind churned. If her father's warning was real, trusting Evan could mean handing Aurelius the only weapon that could control or destroy the network. If it was manipulation, hesitation now could doom everyone still linked in. She stepped behind Evan, her hand. Drifting toward her sidearm, Luis cover Emily. Evan froze mid-keystroke. Naomi, what are you doing? Making sure this ends the right way, she said. Cray smiled faintly. Almost expectant. The timer hit 010. Naomi's finger brushed the safety on her pistol. The air felt heavier, the hum of the conductor pounding in her ears, in time with the timer's rapid descent. Double codon 08. Double quotes, Naomi, Evan said, voice tight but steady. If you pull me now, we lose. Everything. Trust me. Cray's tone was almost gentle. Or trust your father. He's never lied to you. 005. Emily's voice strained with effort. If sync breaks, it's over, everyone dies. Naomi's pulse roared in her head. She thought of her father's face in the membrane, the way he'd turned toward her. She thought of the 3 years Evan had been gone. The anchor somehow in his possession, the subtle way he'd steered them every step since. Her decision snapped into place. She yanked Evan back from the console, slamming him against the wall. Luis in controls. Evan's eyes went wide. You don't understand. Luis didn't hesitate. He slid into position, his broad hands flying clumsily over the interface. Guided by Emily's shouted instructions, the conductor's glow surged, the anchor's glyphs flaring white-hot. Naomi shoved Evan to the floor, pinning him with a knee. If you're clean, you'll thank me later. If you're not... She didn't finish. The timer hit 001 and froze. The hum in the chamber shifted, deepened, the light from the conductor rolling outward, like a slow wave. Cray's smile finally cracked. What have you done? Emily gasped, tears streaking her cheeks. The sequence is locked. It's going to work. But before Naomi could breathe relief, the membrane rippled violently. The face of her father reappearing this time, contorted, straining. His voice echoing through the chamber. Naomi, get out now. The floor shuddered. Somewhere deep beneath them, something massive began to break free. The chamber shook hard enough to knock Naomi sideways, her grip on Evan slipping. From within the conductor, the glow shifted from steady blue to a violent, strobing white. The cables feeding into the floor began to spark, popping like gunfire. Emily screamed, hands flying off the plates. It's not supposed to do this, it's fighting back. Luis grabbed her, hauling her away from the console just as one of the copper panels exploded in a shower of sparks. We're moving now. Cray's operatives opened fire again. But the tremors were throwing their aim wide. As the membrane of the conductor bulged outward in grotesque waves. It's like something inside was trying to tear its way free. Naomi locked eyes with her father's face as it flickered in and out. His mouth, forming a single word over and over, run. The strobing light intensified, flooding the cavern in blinding pulses. Evan scrambled to his feet, shouting over the chaos. The anchor's forcing a total collapse. You've got maybe 3 minutes before this whole place goes with it. Cray moved toward the conductor, ignoring the debris raining from above. No, I can still salvage this. One of the main cables snapped free, whipping across the chamber with a deafening crack. It struck the floor inches from him, the impact. Throwing him backward, Naomi pulled Emily toward the freight elevator. Luis, cover. But the elevator gate was already buckling from the strain of the tremors. The platform below them shuddering as if the very supports were tearing loose. Evan yelled from across the chamber. Service lift north wall. Naomi spun, spotting the narrow steel cage tucked behind a bank of dead consoles. She shoved Emily toward it, Luis right behind her. Evan was already sprinting for the controls. A deep, wet, tearing sound echoed from the conductor. Naomi risked one last glance back in. Saw the membrane split. Something stepped through. The thing that emerged wasn't entirely human. It had the height and frame of a man. But its skin was latticed with faintly glowing lines, circuitry woven into muscle and bone. Where eyes should have been were 2 deep wells of shifting light. Flickering like static, Naomi's breath caught. She'd seen glimpses of this in the old Aurelius research files prototype schematics for an interface organism. But those drawings had never captured the weight of its presence, the way the air seemed to bend around it. Cray was already on his feet, his voice reverent, magnificent. Fully integrated. The next stage. The conductor turned its head toward him spoke in a voice that was a chorus, male and female, layered and wrong. You are irrelevant. It moved faster than Naomi could track, crossing the chamber in a blur, seizing Cray by the throat. His operatives opened fire, but the round sparked harmlessly off the conductor's skin. With a single motion, it hurled Cray across the floor. He slammed into the far wall and didn't rise. Evan had the service lift gate open now. Naomi move. Luis shoved Emily inside. Naomi backed toward them, keeping her pistol up, even knowing it was useless. The conductor's gaze shifted to her, and for a heartbeat she swore she saw her father's eyes within the static. Go, he said just that in his voice. Naomi's chest tightened. I'm not leaving you. The conductor stepped closer, the chamber shaking harder with each movement. You will, or all die. A support beam above groaned, then gave way, smashing into the floor between them. Luis grabbed her arm, yanking her into the lift. Evan slammed the gate shut and hit the controls. The cage lurched upward, just as the conductor turned back toward the core housing, its body flaring with light so bright Naomi had to shield her eyes. The last thing she saw before the lift cleared. The chamber was the conductor placing both hands on the anchor's housing. Light pouring from its skin, followed by a sound like the world tearing in two. The service lift rattled and groaned as it climbed, the tremors from below shuddering through the steel frame. Somewhere far beneath them, the tearing roar grew into a rolling detonation, like an earthquake wrapped in thunder. Luis had Emily in a tight grip, shielding her from falling dust and fragments shaken loose from the shaft walls. Evan stood rigid at the controls, jaw tight, saying nothing. Naomi gripped the gate, staring into the dark below until the light from the conductor's chamber was gone. When the lift finally clanged into its upper housing, they burst into a narrow maintenance tunnel. Emergency lights flickered, and the air here was thick with the scent of ozone and concrete dust. They ran twice. Side passages caved in behind them, the sound of twisting metal and collapsing stone chasing them upward. The last ladder climb opened into the base of a derelict storage shed. Its warped door hanging from one hinge. Cold night air hit them like a shock. They staggered out into a field half swallowed by weeds. The distant silhouette of the main Aurelius facility standing silent against the horizon. Then, with a low rumble, a section of the ground around it sagged, swallowed into itself in a plume of dust and debris. Final collapse. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Emily's small voice broke the silence. He's still alive. Naomi turned. Emily, I could feel him right before it happened. He changed, but he's still in there. Somewhere. Luis exhaled hard. If that's true, let's hope he's on our side. Evan's gaze stayed fixed on the ruin in the distance. If he's not, Aurelius might not be the only thing that went underground tonight. Naomi looked back at the collapsing ground, her father's last words echoing in her head. She didn't know if she'd freed him or unleashed something worse. Either way, she knew the truth. The cover-up was over. The war was just beginning.